Good gardening, people. Today is Earth Day, and it's going along with the ecological theme of the class that I wish to discuss its ramifications as it pertains to actually helping the problem it purports to champion. The history of the movement began in the 1950s quietly and unobtrusively in garden magazines and county agent brochures. It certainly was not a wild-eyed radical notion in those days, just a quiet philosophy of renewable, sustainable growth and food production. But then along came the 1960s, and with the counterculture movement came a huge disconnect with the previous generation on many fronts: drug use, the war in Vietnam, industrialization, and farming practices. By 1970s, the protest everything was in vogue, and it became yet one of many subjects claimed by the left as a bludgeon to use against the right, that is, Earth Day. This didn't happen overnight. Concern for overpopulation growth was a political worry, and it was Richard Nixon, not Kennedy or LBJ, who brought to life the Environmental Protection Agency to address the concerns of pollution. Popularized rock music. We had songs like Back to the Garden and Big Yellow Taxi by Joni Mitchell, which stylized the notion that to not return to a primitive way of life was somehow evil or contrary to justice to the earth. Many other groups as well led a mantra of escape from current society towards socialism and primitive cultures imitating the American Indians. The famous Iron-Eyes Cody ad that appeared on television showed an Indian shedding a tear at the sight of garbage in his river as he paddles his canoe. Many historic rewrites and political leanings began to form around ecology and farming practices. Earth Day was the declaration not of protect the earth so much, but to tear down the society as it had been traditionally created by conservative thinking. And it stuck. An ever-widening rift between the left and right has grown to the point that the polarization is so vast now we're in danger of a civil war. Today's version of the eco-warfare is over global warming. The language on the left is incendiary, and on the right, totally dismissive. It is no way to gather a consensus to our problems. I believe both philosophies will admit the ecology is suffering at mankind's management, but players in both camps are so vitriol that a chance of heads coming together before it is too late is nigh on impossible. My way or the highway does not work well at the brink of civil wars. And what is too late? Well, if like dozens of times in Earth's history, all the polar ice melts and climate shifts, that will not be the fatal blow to end the planet or mankind. But warfare, food shortage-driven wars, and lack of proper land management may very well be the end of mankind, whether we have global warming or not. Both sides need to listen more and talk less. Both sides have excellent points. We can never get rid of petroleum, however. Not only it is a current power source we're dependent on, but it's a lubricant that has no substitute for running machinery of all kinds, including electric cars. It's what we use to create plastics, a great many drugs, fertilizers, which without, our society would be scrambling for generations to find a substitute to create those things. It may be a pollutant, but it is also very much a component of our human survival at this time. But on the other hand, what's wrong with finding a cleaner alternative to gasoline? Corn, I find a bad idea. It forces the price of food up in the third world, so I nix it as a long-term solution. It too pollutes when burned. Hydrogen is the best long-term plan that I've seen. Likely, we will never run out of that. 7/10 of the earth is covered in water, and 2/3 of water is hydrogen. But that is still years away to make a safe, inexpensive form of hydrogen transportation. It also is highly explosive. You might think about the Hindenburg disaster as an example. However, in the short term, natural gas is our best answer, in my opinion. It is in vast abundant supply. It's virtually untapped. It can be liquefied for storage and transport. It burns very cleanly. And any car currently on the road can be easily modified to convert from gasoline to burning natural gas. In other words, we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. Just change it from a flat piece of wood to a rimmed wheel with spokes. But even here, we have radicalized the solution. Left-wing activists demand we stop harvesting natural gas because of fracking. Never mind, it is the solution to what they've been demanding for 50 years now. It's an industry, and we can't have industry making a profit. So let's consider the other options. Solar power. Well, you can't really use it to power cars or airplanes. And where it can be harvested in abundance, like the Southwest, it cannot be easily transported to where it's needed most, like the Northeast or Alaska. The electric power grid loses power the farther it is sent by wire. Batteries, however, to store it are another option, but they are highly lethal in landfills, and the toxin in those batteries never goes away. So if we switch over to that, we're going to have a whole lot of dead zones from the batteries that wear out. Wind power. The turbines are very expensive, and they're also dangerous to birds. They have a short life before they wear out, and the giant turbines and things also present a landfill disaster, not to mention transporting them by highway, an expensive, difficult endeavor. They are way oversized for the safe transport limits. Water power. Well, we've already established on both sides that it kills fish and it disturbs ecosystems. Nuclear power. Well, in my lifetime, we've had 2 meltdowns and a tsunami nuclear power plant disaster. They produce weapons-grade plutonium, so we don't want to really have third world countries using them unless they're responsible. And the spent cores cannot be safely stored anywhere on the planet. So all the eco-friendly talk is just that. It's talk. We need solutions. We can find solutions to these problems, but not by summoning up false hopes through symbolic gestures that don't work on a large scale, or creating boogeymen to try and scare the public toward hidden political agendas. That is, more government regulation and socialism is the answer to all of our eco-friendly needs. No, it is not. China is one of the worst polluting, if not the worst polluting countries on the earth, and it is the poster boy of working socialist states. We don't want to emulate that. The truth is, if it boils down to it, only societies that are wealthy and well-fed even think about pollution. It is a luxury of the rich to have time and money to pursue clean living. In the third world, they worry too much about avoiding wars and famines to care if their rivers are clean or their living space free of air pollution and garbage. So, happy Earth Day. You people need to get real and quit putting symbolism over substance. I looked online today since they kept talking about Earth Day being so perfect back in 1970, see exactly what some of the things were said back then. I found a few of the predictions that were made back then. Harvard biologist George Ward estimated that civilization will end within 15 or 30 years, that would be 1985 to 2000, unless immediate action is taken against the problem facing mankind. Well, 20 years after 2000, we're still here. Population will inevitably completely outstrip whatever small increases in food supply we make, said Paul Ehrlich, confidently declaring in April of 1970. The death rate will increase until at least 100 to 200 million people per year will be starving to death during the next 10 years. That would be by 1980. Most of the people are going to die in the greatest cataclysm the history of man has already been born, said Paul Ehrlich again. He, in an essay he entitled Eco Catastrophe. By 1975, some experts feel that food shortages will have escalated the present level of world hunger and starvation into famines of unbelievable proportions. Other experts, more optimistic, think the ultimate food population collision will not occur until the decade of the 1980s. Yeah, we worried a whole lot about population growth and overpopulation then. Well, we've reached 6 billion and we still haven't hit those problems. Ehrlich sketched out his most alarmist scenario for the 1970 Earth Day, issuing the Progressive, assuring readers that in 1989, some 4 billion people, including 65 million Americans, would perish of the great die-off. Well, that's yet to happen, although we have had a few people die of the COVID, not related to the environment. It is already too late to avoid mass starvation, declared Dennis Hayes, the chief organizer for Earth Day. Well, we do have hunger in the world, but it's not the doom and gloom they were predicting in 1970. Scientists have solid experimental and theoretical evidence to support the following predictions. In a decade, urban dwellers will have to wear gas masks to survive air pollution. By 1985, air pollution will have reduced the amount of sunlight reaching to the Earth by half. Well, that never happened or even came close to happening. Ecologist Kenneth Watt told Time magazine that at the present rate of nitrogen buildup, it's only a matter of time before light will be filtered out of the atmosphere and none of our land will be usable. Well, that is probably true, but it hasn't happened anywhere in the recent past. Paul Ehrlich chimed in and predicting in 1970 that air pollution is certainly going to take hundreds of thousands of lives in the next 2 years alone. He sketched a scenario where 200,000 Americans would die in 1973 alone from smog disasters, New York and Los Angeles especially. He warned that in the issue of Audubon that DDT and chlorinated hydrocarbons may substantially reduce the life expectancy of people born after 1945. Ehrlich warned that Americans born since 1946 that their life expectancy would only be 49 years and that it would continue to drop to 42 years by if you were born by 1980. Then he figured it might level out. However, current life expectancy is 78.6 years. Dr. S. Dillon Riley of the Smithsonian Institute wrote, in 25 years, 60 to 80% of all life on Earth will be extinct. Predicted this in 1970. Kenneth Watt also warned us of a coming ice age that would be so chilling that by the year 2000, it would be 11 degrees cooler on the planet as an average. Well, that's Earth Day for you. Alarmist, shrill talk, same as it is today. Yesterday, we began talking about lawn care, and I got about halfway through the year. January, do nothing. February and March, depending on where you live, you put down pre-emergent to block weeds. In April, you fertilize and you put down crabgrass and pre-emergent. But there's one thing I forgot to mention, which was grub control. You can put down a product called GrubX in April that will kill off all of the grubs in the yard, which will also deny you problems with moles and voles. We talked about those being their food supply, and by killing off the food supply in April, then you eliminate their presence for the rest of the year. Crabgrass pre-emergent is also recommended to mention. May, is the time to patch the lawn. If you have issues with thinness of grass, we do not overseed. Overseeding is foolish, but you can't put down sod or seed in shady areas only. And that shady area seed is called small fescue. Don't put down sunny seed in the shade. It doesn't work. June, things tend to warm up a lot. We want to fertilize again. And if you did do some repair work on earlier parts of the spring, you want to cut back on your watering quite a bit, especially if you're having a wet month. You want to water only in the mornings or in the early afternoon, never at night, never too close to nightfall that the ground is wet at nights. Why? Because June is the month we start getting funguses all the time. Especially if you seeded in the spring, you will have a big fungus problem. Fungicide is really expensive, has to be applied multiple times, and you usually have to switch to a second kind to fight it back. And even then, you don't totally knock it out. It will eventually go away when temperatures and conditions change. But if you messed up, left your lawn so that it's wet at night all the time, you're going to have fungus problems, especially in areas where there's puddling. July is the opposite problem. We tend to start seeing droughts happen then. It's rare that I've seen a rainy July. So now you have to water to keep the grass alive, but fungus is still a problem. So you still have to avoid wet lawns at night. You have to treat it, continue treating it with fungicide if necessary. But the best way of doing it is to avoid that. And aeration in the spring can help avoid fungus, but there's no guarantees. Fungus is also very, very prevalent. If you've had it in the past, expect to get it again. August is a very busy month. This is the month I want you to seed, especially toward the end of it. The best time to do seeding is late August and in the whole entire month of September. Now, if you have a wiregrass problem, you're going to have to kill it off before you try and reseed. We will go in at a later time how to kill it off because it's nearly impossible to kill. If you have wiregrass, you don't want to aerate or reseed at that time. You want to get rid of it first. Especially you can't aerate, because what'll happen is you'll tear little pieces of the wiregrass root out with the aerator and spread it all over the place, and you'll never be rid of it. As it is, it's almost impossible to kill. So you either kill the wiregrass, then reseed, or if you don't have wiregrass, you want to aerate and then reseed, not both. This is also the month that if you're not reseeding, you can use a first dose of pre-emergent to fight off the spring weeds. Some of them do germinate as early as August. That doesn't mean you can avoid doing it again in February and March, but if you want to get an early start on these weeds and you're not seeding, you can put down the pre-emergent gallery. September, if you've seeded in August, you need to be watering daily. If you want to seed in September, you want to be watering daily. They need to be well established before you stop watering so frequently. October, you want to do one last for the year really heavy fertilization. Don't do it on top of leaves. You need to rake the leaves first. And then you want to put down pre-emergent if the lawn is well established, if you didn't do it in August. You really need 2 doses of pre-emergent to block weeds. First one will knock out some, second one will knock out the others, but it really needs a dose both in the fall and the spring. You just can't use pre-emergent at the same time as seeding. It's one or the other, because pre-emergent also kills grass seed as it's germinating. So you kind of have a multiple choice there in October. If I've reseeded, I can't put down pre-emergent till spring. But if I have not if I have not reseeded, then a pre-emergent will get me started. November and December, essentially, you don't have to do anything except watch the green grass. And the better you took care of your lawn and during the year, the greener and longer it will stay green into winter time. Okay, we're going to describe some of the worst weeds that you'll ever run into. Of course, it depends on where you are located geographically speaking, but some of these I've seen wherever I live. Gnat's hedge on the left. It's a weed that likes to grow in wet areas like near ditches where there's standing water. It's got kind of a spiny stem with a prickly yellow head at the top of it. It is extremely difficult to kill. I recommend a product called Image Kills Crabgrass, sprayed on it at least every 2 weeks with wilt proof to get rid of it. Practically nothing else will knock it out. I know that sounds silly, but a product for killing crabgrass is the best thing to get rid of gnat's hedge. Johnson grass, the bane of my existence. It's always on the top 10 worst weeds of all time, and for good reason. It sends roots about 2 feet down into the ground, and they snap off at the slightest attempt to pull up the plant. And every one of those tiny little pieces of root will turn into a new plant. It tends to grow long and stocky. It was introduced to this country by an explorer named Johnson, who went to Africa and saw this wonderful grass growing there, figured that's what was feeding all those herds of animals. So he brought it back to us. Unfortunately, cows don't like it because once it's cut, it comes back with a very bitter, possibly poisonous taste. So the cows won't eat it. It's now escaped and is an invasive species. On our left, we have Poa Anewa. It sounds like a Hawaiian plant, but it isn't. And frankly, I don't really have as big a problem with it as some people do. And what it tends to do that annoys most lawn people is it blooms in August when all of the other plants have a tendency to put out seed in the spring. So it gets all these yellow heads on it. Wherever you have it in the yard, it makes a big lime green yellow patch that's very noticeable. It doesn't grow very tall or very fast. I'd say maybe 2 or 3 inches. But it loves compacted, hard soils where nothing else will grow, which is why I kind of like it. At least it's green and it covers the ground someplace. But the roots on it are microscopically thin. And because of that, no poison that I know of will kill it. Nothing. You can try the strongest poisons around and it won't kill off the root systems. So you basically have to take a shovel and a hoe and dig out any patches of yellow that you see in August growing a Poa Anewa. I'm sure it isn't the grass they make Hawaiian skirts out of. It's way too short. Then we have bamboo. That's another one I personally like. I wish I had a nice stand of bamboo. I'd use those poles for beams, all kinds of construction projects. But be warned about bamboo. Once you've put it in your yard, you will never, 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 ever, ever get rid of it. It sends out roots horizontally through the ground 200 or 300 feet. And once it's established, practically no combination of poisons on earth will get down the length of that root. So you have to constantly play whack-a-mole with it, kill it in one place, and wait for it to spring up some other place. And it takes a witch's brew of chemicals to kill it. It is one tough plant. I don't think that it can be killed personally, but we used to try really hard back when I worked at the nursery. Okay, wiregrass. Around here in Missouri, it is king, and no one pays the slightest attention to it. I don't know how they miss it, because if you're out in the yard running and you have wiregrass, you're going to trip on it and break your neck. Literally, this stuff is as tough as rope, and it sends out runners all over the place. It's a really coarse grass. It's in the zoysia family, which includes Bermuda and St. Augustine and a couple of other southern grasses, but it's a northern variety. And it is tough, 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 tough. You think bamboo sends out roots. This thing can send roots down 6 feet into the ground. It can travel underneath streets and sidewalks to invade other yards, and it is practically indestructible. You can kill it off with a witch's brew of chemicals, which would include wilt-proof, grass scatter, and practically anything else you can throw in there in the way of poison. You're not going to save your lawn. If you have this, you're going to have to kill the whole thing off, and after it's dead, then you can think about reseeding. But it will take over. No force on earth will stop it. I think if you dropped a nuclear bomb on your yard, it would still come back, because the nuclear bomb would have to kill 6 to 8 feet into the ground to get rid of it. So wiregrass is not a good one to have, and it's very difficult to kill, and it's very prevalent throughout at least Missouri and Virginia, and the places that I've lived. Another plant that has a very deep root system, I used to fight all the time when I was in Colorado, was called bindweed. It has these little purple or white flowers, and it's a little vine that grows along the ground, can stand all kinds of drought. It will grow where grass won't grow, and it is very, very difficult to get rid of. Again, you're going to have a systemic herbicide that will go all the way down 6 feet, and things like Roundup will only travel about 3 feet down a root. So you're going to have a special systemic to kill it. At any rate, these are the weeds that you absolutely don't want, the weeds from hell. We've talked about the weeds, and next class we'll be talking about spring lawns. Again, like I say, you'll be tempted to plant grass seed this time of year. Don't do it. I mentioned it before, but only in the shady parts of your lawn can you get away with it. I'll discuss more in detail next time exactly what the repercussions are if you listen to all those lawn companies out there who tell you, now's the time to plant grass seed. Remember, they make money every time you kill your lawn accidentally and have to buy more seed from them. So don't listen to them, listen to me. Well, that about ends our Earth Day presentation. It's always good to see you folks here. I hope you're enjoying the recordings. They're getting slowly better as we're getting better equipment, more editing stuff, and learning how to do this. Bear with us, it will get more entertaining. I know it's dull sometimes, but it's also very informational, which is what you need, what you sign up for was information. So again, folks, good gardening. See you next time.